and dudettes. How are you guys? This is Chazzy and welcome to What's the Damage? And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics in the whole world, horror movies. In fact, I recently did a review of Annabelle Comes Home, a new horror movie that's been in theaters. Well, it's not in theaters anymore, right? It came out months ago, but that's beside the point. So, guys, for the entirety of October, I'm going to be giving you guys some creepy content, some scary movie reviews, and topics about horror in general, some gameplays, okay? So, let's get into it. Have horror movies become, or have they not become, overrated? It is a very, very sensitive topic to cover. You know, people have different opinions on this kind of thing, but in a sense, I do believe that they have. You know, I think that horror movies used to be so much better, you know, they used to really make us feel fear, you know, and they were a lot more psychologically, like they would induce more suspense in you than they do today. Now, in a nutshell, I think that today modern horror movies are scarier. They are definitely more frightening because we have more technology now. We have CGI, we have these kinds of things that can make movies really feel realistic, you know. But in the past, like around the 80s, there was this trend of, you know, gore and violence and blood, you know. So I think that, you know, shock horror of the 80s was much more effective than today, that's for sure. Because practical effects do make things look a bit more unnerving, so to speak. But then again, guys, CGI, I mean, you can do anything with computer-generated imagery. Literally anything. So I think that it makes movies look a bit more visceral, you know, than they did back in the 80s. As such, I think that, you see, when I started watching horror movies, I was already, I think it was around the 2000s or so, but recently, a few years ago, I started to really get into them. And the movie, I can pinpoint one movie specifically that really got me into the genre, pulled me into the horror genre, which was The Conjuring. Alright, now, The Conjuring is this thing where, like, it's based on a true story, all of them. It's an entire franchise of movies, and each one of them is based on the real-life investigations of paranormal researchers Ed and Lorraine Warren, alright? Now, when something is based on a true story, for me personally, it's much more frightening because you know that at some point it actually happened. You know that at some point what you see to a certain degree did happen in real life, you know? Because movies, of course, they stretch the truth quite a bit, you know? But horror movies have always been a very... It's a thin line to tread on, you know, because how exactly, just how much can you blur the lines between reality and fiction, right? The Conjuring came out in 2013, and then there was a sequel in 2016, I think, and then there was these spin-offs, like there was Annabelle. There's 3 Annabelle movies now. There was The Nun, you know, there's a whole bunch of movies that you can make out of the whole... the plethora of investigations conducted by the Warrens, right? And when I started watching horror movies around this time of The Conjuring, it started to make me wonder, how exactly does this work? Like, how can a movie that was made in a modern day setting be so frightening, but at the same time, sometimes feel so cheesy, you know? Movies like Insidious, which were directed by the same director that made The Conjuring, James Wan, the Insidious movies are just terrible. They are not entertaining, they are not scary, they feel too cliched, you know? And the practical effects and the CGI work is just dull, you know? And I think that there's 4, right? I think there has been a 4th movie released recently. I didn't even bother to watch it, man, because after the 3rd one I was like, wow, what am I even still doing here? But I think that horror today is something that's just so... I mean, it's like the directors aren't even trying anymore, you know? And there's so much, like... I think I'm gonna sneeze. There was such an reliance on, I've said this in other videos before, there was such a reliance on cheap jump scares, man, that they don't even know how to create tension anymore. You know, it's like, okay, let's have like an hour and 20 long movie, and let's have about, I don't know, 60% of it be filled with jump scares. That's pretty much how filmmakers make horror nowadays, you know? And it's very rare for a movie to be genuinely spooky, you know? To be actually, authentically frightening, you know? Creepy and unnerving, that makes you actually have difficulty sleeping at night, you know? And recently I watched a movie that was an example of a horror movie gone completely wrong, which is Into the Woods. It's on Netflix if you guys want to check it out, but I suggest you don't because it sucks. It's a completely terrible movie. It's boring. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. It is boring. Despite having Patrick Wilson, who's one of my favorite actors, who did all of the Conjuring movies and appeared in some of the Annabelle movies, you know, and he's a good actor. But he was wasted in Into the Woods, man. He was just wasted. His talent was utterly just thrown away. Because it's an M Night Shyamalan movie, so you can already expect it to not be, you know. Let's be honest here. M Night has seen better days in the movie industry, right? So basically, it's just like a suspense thriller of sorts, where they go into the tall grass, and then stuff starts changing, and then, you know, you start, I don't know, getting these weird feelings of deja vu, and then that's when you realize that there's kind of like a Groundhog Day effect happening, where it keeps resetting itself. You know, it's so cliche. We've seen it 100 times before in other movies and TV shows and books, and now they're trying to do something that's already been done, but in a slightly different way. Because now you're doing it in a field of tall grass. You've seen Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, right? The maze at the end. It's pretty much the same thing. It's pretty much the same thing. You know, it's like the same movie, like reshot with different actors. So it's just horrible. And back in the day, when horror movies were still relying on, when they were still being born, right? Horror movies have been around for a long time, but I think that they had a very, they had a spike in growth in the 70s, you know, because in the 60s, the most prominent movie we had, I think, was Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock, and then some years later in the 70s, that's when we started getting things like Jaws and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and later on we would have Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween. Halloween actually was also in the 70s. I believe it was in 1978. Halloween, this is funny. Halloween is not my favorite horror franchise. I'm actually not even that big a fan, but I am a big fan of Michael Myers. He is my favorite horror character of all time, because he's just so mysterious, you know, and he's very straightforward, you know. He's silent. He doesn't say a word. He has a mask. He has a knife. He comes, he kills, he leaves. He goes somewhere else. Leather, rinse, repeat. He does this over and over and over again, and he doesn't die. He's like invincible. And I think that's just awesome for any horror movie character, you know. Now, John Carpenter, he directed the original Halloween in '78 in a way that was very unsettling. You know, the movie isn't scary. It's just unsettling, because certain camera angles that he uses, like when Laurie, her name is Laurie, right? Is her name Laurie? I think it is. Wow, how could I forget? It's because it's so many characters. Anyway, yeah, I think her name was Laurie. She's Michael's sister, right? And then I believe that there was a scene towards the end of the movie where Michael was already trying to kill her, and then the camera shows her, right, after supposedly subduing Michael in the background. And then as she's sitting there, you know, gasping for breath, you can see very silently behind her Michael Myers getting up, you know, just no music at all, nothing, just silence and him very slowly standing up. That is brilliant. That is brilliant. And horror movies today don't have the same creativity. The Conjuring movies are good examples of exceptions, right? Because they have some shots that are just, there are jump scares, yes, and some of them, yes, are a little cheap, but it's very few. They're very few and far in between, you know? I think the Annabelle movies have a few more cheap jump scares, but Annabelle Creation was directed by David Sandberg, who made that short on YouTube called Lights Out, which is one of the creepiest videos I have ever seen in my life. I only saw it once and I will never see it again, but you guys are welcome to check it out later if you want to. And this is the guy who directed Annabelle Creation, and you can kind of see that the way that he directs things, the movies that he makes and the horror shorts, they seeped into the movie that he made for Hollywood, right? Because you can kind of tell this is not James Wan anymore, you know? And before I even knew that it was a different director, I already knew that it wasn't James Wan, you know? Because it didn't feel like his style, you know? If you watch the Conjuring movies and then you watch Annabelle, for example, you're going to see that it's different. Annabelle Creation, at least. I don't remember if it was James Wan who directed the first Annabelle, but you guys get the idea. I think that in general, in a nutshell, horror is a shadow of what it used to be. Like, yeah, every year, if they release like 30 horror movies, like maybe 5 will be good, you know? And everything else is just going to be a plethora of cliches and tropes and cheap jump scares everywhere, you know? It's annoying as hell, man. I like horror movies, I really do. Despite living by myself and sometimes watching them at night alone, I still enjoy them, you know? I still really enjoy them. And I don't know. I think that horror, You see, when you want to create a good horror movie, the first thing you need is a story. You need a plot. You can base it on true facts or you can create something yourself, but there has to be a story. You have to tap into people's worst fears, you know? For example, a movie about being buried alive, a movie where people burn to death, a movie about clowns, you know? I mean, there are many people who have a fear of clowns. I forgot the name of it, but that's one of the reasons that these It movies with Pennywise the Clown are so successful, right? But I'm not afraid of clowns, so if I watch It or It Chapter 2, it's probably not even gonna scare me, you know? And it's just, I guess it depends on what you can play on, you know, how you can get people to fall into your trap, you know? Sorry to make that Saw-like reference there, but yeah, Saw is not a horror movie franchise, by the way. It is torture porn. It's horrible. It's just violence. There's no horror at all, so screw that. But anyway, the more violence and gore you have in a horror movie, the less it becomes a horror movie and the more it becomes a slasher movie. All right? Now, a long time ago, I recorded a video for this channel, back when I was still starting, talking about the difference between horror and slasher. I don't know if I'll even leave it here for you guys to watch, because it's so old and the quality is so crappy. But anyway, what I talked about in that video basically is that there is a difference between slasher and horror. Slasher, it has an abundance of violence, blood, gore, and sexual content, nudity, and all of these, you know, dark themes, right? Whereas horror, you can go the entire movie without seeing one drop of blood, you know? And I think that those are the kinds of movies that sit better with me, you know, because I don't like violence. I can't see too much blood in real life or on TV because I start getting queasy and I may even faint. I'm serious. I can play violent video games all day, but watching one violent horror movie, I'm done. That's why I'm staying far away from the new Joker movie. But anyway, so if you include too much violence in a movie, I think that the story is going to be lost on the audience. At least if I'm the audience. There are people who enjoy violence. I don't judge them, even though I think they're crazy. But basically, guys, I mean, today everything is like CGI is one of the best inventions for cinema. All right, you can't even argue with this. Some of the most successful movies ever for CGI. I think that Avengers Endgame became the highest grossing movie of all time, and that movie is filled to the brim with CGI, right? And before that, it was Avatar, which also has a lot of CGI. But anyway, the point is, horror movies can be done very, very effectively today using CGI. If you want to use practical effects, that's cool, but don't make them so cheesy and campy like back in the 80s, because there were very few exceptions to those old horror movies that were really, really good despite so many practical effects. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a good example, the original 1974 one. That movie is hard to watch, man. That movie is really hard to watch. You know, I almost vomited and I couldn't even finish it. You know, and there was a remake, I think in 2005, with Alexandra Daddario, the actress who did Percy Jackson. And believe it or not, it wasn't even too hard to watch. It was violent. There's a scene where a guy gets chainsawed in half, you know, but it was okay because I had already seen the original, which was even more visceral. So, in a nutshell, horror is very overrated today. If I see a horror movie coming to theaters, I'm very likely not to even watch it, unless it's a flagship title franchise like The Conjuring or Annabelle. I flocked to the movie theater to watch every single movie in the Conjuring Annabelle franchise since, you know, the beginning. I've seen all of them: The Conjuring, The Conjuring 2, Annabelle, Annabelle Creation, The Nun, Annabelle Comes Home. I've watched all of them in theaters. So they are the only exceptions, you know. And watching movies here in Brazil is expensive, you know. Everything here in this country is expensive, but watching movies is pretty tough, you know. And I don't have time. I have a job, you know. I don't have time to watch them in theaters anymore. But I always, whenever there's a horror movie that I feel is worth checking out, you know, then I always go and I always record a review for my channel. But anyway, guys, I don't even think there's anything else I can say, you know. I just wanted to rant a little bit about that. Now, horror done the right way can be very scary. It can be very scary. Examples of horror done the wrong way, in my opinion: Saw, the Saw franchise has way too much violence. It's basically just, I don't know what the director was on when he thought of this idea, man. It's basically people being tortured, until they die, and being challenged to escape, and I don't know. But the Halloween franchise, Friday the 13th, all of these characters, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, Leatherface, Pinhead, all of these classic horror movie characters in their respective movies, they shine, But I enjoy the remakes more than the originals, which is ironic because some of the Friday the 13th remake and the Nightmare on Elm Street remake were pretty violent, although they were surprisingly watchable. I don't know why. Maybe it's because these characters are so iconic to me, But the original movies kind of suck. Friday the 13th, man. Do you guys know that Jason wasn't even in the original Friday the 13th? It was actually his mom who was killing everyone to try to avenge her son Jason, who appears at the end of the movie. And then in the second movie onward, that's when we see Jason. And he gets his iconic hockey mask, I think only in the third movie. It's crazy. And the 2009 reboot just gave him everything right off the bat. In the first movie, it was him killing everyone and he already got the mask. That was kind of cool how they sped things up a little bit, I think it was a good remake. Nightmare on Elm Street also was a really, really good remake, And the Halloween one, I don't even remember if I watched it. I think I saw a bit of the second one, but I couldn't keep watching it because it was too violent. There's a scene when Michael starts stabbing a nurse in the hospital, man. What the hell? I know it's Michael Myers, but damn. And I really wanted to watch the last Halloween movie, the one that came out last year, I think, the new remake, but I still haven't. Now it's like 40 years after the first movie, because they keep doing this with Halloween, right? Like 20 years after the first movie, they made Halloween H2O. Sorry, H20, Force of Habit. It's like, okay, 20 years after the first movie. Nothing else that happened in between happened. Then they released a bunch of other sequels. Now it's Halloween H40. Now it's like, okay, guys, from the first movie into this one, 40 years, nothing happened. Why do you keep doing this? Okay, guys, that's pretty much it. Okay, this has been my unscripted rant about horror movies. Okay, I'm gonna be recording a lot more. I don't have a script. I don't come up with scripts when I record these videos. So I literally just thought of a topic, turned on the camera, and went for it, okay? But hey, guys, in case I don't get around to saying it, at the end of the month, happy Halloween, all right? And I hope you guys enjoy the horror content I'm going to be putting out until the end of the month. That I'm still going to be working on until November, but this month I'm going to try to prioritize some more spooky stuff for you guys, okay? If you don't get too scared to watch. Okay, guys, so I hope you're enjoying my new facelift of my series, different background, different camera, different features and edition, and different title cards for all my series, okay? 2019 is going to come to an end very soon, and from 2020 onwards, my videos are going to be awesome. I promise you guys that, okay? And I guess that's it. Remember, guys, lock your doors tonight, don't sleep alone, and make sure you check under your bed for the boogeyman. You never know where he is. Wow, this sucks. That's it, guys. This is Chazzy signing out for now, and as always, I will see you in the next video.